All right. Thanks again all for coming. For those of you who know me, I'm a bond salesman by trade. I'm not an interviewer nor a podcaster. Thankfully, you came here to hear Adam speak and not me. So yes, I'm Stephen Bennett. I started listening to you, Ace, I went to school in Washington, D.C., and I discovered you and Dr. Drew on WHFS. Does that sound right?
That was our affiliate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 1996 is when I graduated. And then I moved on to Seattle. So I heard you on your morning syndicated radio show for many years. I remember when you started the podcast, I owned a Man Grate at one point, which I believe was your very first sponsor or second sponsor.
Yeah, Man Grate was their first sponsor because there was no podcasting, there was no sponsors, there was no business model.
Yeah, back in the day. So I'm very familiar with your story. I own all your books. Let's assume that most of the audience isn't. So I want to take you beginning. You're very open. You talk about how you tell us about how you grew up in the San Fernando Valley. Your mom was on welfare, on food stamps. Talk about your childhood. And what I'm curious is, let's lead to where did your drive come from? Because some people that grew up in that situation could have ended up in that cycle. How did you break that cycle?
My drive was basically desperation. We didn't have money. You know, I think people think I'm kidding, but I wanted air conditioning. And I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and it was hot, really hot in the summer, and we didn't have air conditioning. So I didn't have things that I wanted. I wanted air conditioning. I wanted food. I wanted water and shelter and shade. And it just wasn't being provided. So I thought to myself, well, I need to obtain these things. So I would like to live in a place that had air conditioning and, some top ramen on the shelf and maybe some spoiled milk in the fridge. And that was kind of my goal. And I also kind of looked at my mom and my dad and the sort of, downtrodden environment we lived in. And I just sort of thought, this isn't really the way to do it. We had a TV. It was a black and white Zenith, but 13-inch, but we had a TV. Like when I would babysit my neighbor for $1 an hour, I would see the Love Boat. I would see people had credit cards and luggage, and blazers and things. And I was like, there are people that have this stuff. We're not those people, but maybe if I work real hard, I could figure it out.
Okay. After you barely graduated from high school. Is that an understatement, or is that an overstatement? Barely?
Well, I graduated 500th and second out of 556
okay.
Out of my high school. In terms of my bona fides for being a bad student, I would say it this way. When I was in high school, it was 10th, 11th, and 12th. So it was 3 years, it was 6 semesters. I ended up graduating with a 1.7 GPA, but I played football every spring and baseball every summer, or whatever it was, or winter was football and spring was baseball. So first semester was football, second semester was baseball. So they would give you an automatic A if you did football, and then you did baseball. Gotcha. You just got an A. It was like PE, get an A. So if you take a 1.7 GPA and you back out 6 A's, it's gonna drop a little bit.
Yeah.
And I failed driver's ed and I failed biology in 10th grade. And I'm one of the few people I know who's never taken algebra. I took high school math. It was called high school math. I didn't take algebra in the 9th grade or the 8th grade either. It was just math is what I took. So I was not a stellar student by any stretch of the imagination.
You were good at football, and
Yes.
I believe there could have been some potential for scholarships, but that probably would have required some drive from your parents to fill out applications or push you
Yeah.
along the way.
Well, I was a good football player. I made it to the All Valley team in football and got some accolades and some recruiting from smaller colleges. I don't know all, I can't remember all of them, but there were like UC Davis and Cal Poly Pomona, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Lewis and Clark, you know, in Portland somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
I'm from North Hollywood. I never left North Hollywood. No one in my family had ever been on a plane. So it was like Lewis and Clark. Like I can't, even UC Davis, Cal Poly Pomona, Marshall was one, but that was right after the plane crash. So, you know, there was a rebuilding period for them. So there's like these sort of small Midland places,
Okay.
but I could have gone and theoretically gotten an education at a discount or for free, but I didn't know how to fill out the paperwork, or my family wasn't inclined to do it. I wasn't inclined to do it. I never took the SATs. It was just, they would send me informations. Mostly, weirdly, they would send me their school newspaper. Like UC Davis would send me their newspaper, the school newspaper. I didn't know why. And like envelopes with recruiting things on it, but I just didn't know how to fill it out. So I never did.
So what's the antithesis of a helicopter parent? That's would have been your mom and dad, right?
Well, I always tell this joke, or I try to tell this joke on stage sometimes, but it makes the audience too sad. I have jokes. I have jokes that I tell that makes the audience sad. And I realize, you know, they paid the money, so I should be making them sad.
Okay, we'll skip
But the helicopter joke is, so there's two jokes I tell that makes the audience sad. And they're true. One is my mom died about a year ago, and she donated her body to UCLA Medical, which is totally true. And when I found out that she had donated her body to UCLA, I said, "Are they studying moms who didn't love their sons?" If too sad, right? And the helicopter sad joke that nobody laughs at. Oh God, let's see. There's I'm gonna screw my whole all right. So if you want to know about the comedic process, I'm gonna screw it up right now. What was the last copter out of Vietnam? The no, not the make and the model. What was the serial number on the engine? That was the last one out of not Hanoi, but Saigon. All right, Saigon. It was a Saigon. So I would say my mom was a helicopter mom, but she was the last. She was more the helicopter, the last one that left Saigon.
Okay,
Basically,
okay,
it's a long way to go to fuck up that joke, but yeah, my parents were pretty hands off, and we just, you know, kind of raised ourselves.
Gotcha.
You know.
Yeah, she had the wheel, spun the wheel, and freaked out in her room, right? Or what was the wheel? Hippie thing?
My mom was into, and unless you think any of this nonsense that you're hearing about today about climate change and all the stuff they're trying to scare you about now, it was around in the 70s. And my mom was a big participant in it, and she had something called a biorhythm wheel, which is this ridiculous contraption that, you know, you put your birth date in and you turn it to whatever day it is, and it would tell you, like, is it a good day or a bad day? And I would say to my mom, "Hey, could I get a ride to my friend Teddy Lewis's house in Van Nuys?" And she'd be like, "Hold on, let me talk to the wheel." And she'd be like, "Oh no, it's an extra critical day, like super critical. That's sorry, there's no leaving the house today." So it's like this magic bullshit wheel that you, like, if your son said, "Could I have 50 cents for a snow cone?" You'd be like, "Let me." Yeah, no, sorry. Will you pay for college? Hold on. No,
No,
sorry. The wheel is spoken.
Okay.
There will be no college fund.
Okay. So I just wanted to provide some context to the audience who may not be familiar with that backstory. That's how you grew up. You were determined to get out of it. Saw the Love Boat. You have you have twins, Sonny and Natalia. They grew up a lot differently than you did. So how do you instill, or how did you instill the drive that you have to get to where you are today?
I did.
And your kids?
No, they're wrecked. They're gone. I couldn't instill jack squat into those kids. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you what I didn't do. I couldn't instill anything into those kids. Now they turn out to be pretty good kids, just sort of by nature. Maybe it's nurture, but probably nurture. No, it's probably nature, because there was no nurturing going on.
You got Olga nurturing.
Yeah. Oh, listen, what I did with my kids is I realized this is a bizarre world they're being raised in. They're being raised in a house that has 5 climate zones in it, and they live in a bouncy castle, and someone brings Grubhub to the bouncy castle.
Right? Yeah.
It's so bizarre and so unlike what many of us grew up with, that there wasn't going to be a shot of me like going, you got to go to work at a salt mine and you got to learn, earn your keep. The only thing I do with my kids is I tell them that I work, and I tell them what I'm doing, and I say to them, before I left, I said, I'm going to Denver, I'm working, then I'm going to Louisville, I'm doing 4 shows after this. You guys are welcome to come. And I was like, I tell them all the time, I have to work. This is what I'm doing. And, sometimes they'll go like, why don't you hang out on the weekend? Or how come we don't, whatever? And I just go, because I have to work, because I have to provide. So I have to go to work. And I call them, in between shows, when I'm doing shows on the road and stuff. And I'm like, here's where I am in Appleton, Wisconsin. I'm working. It's Saturday. I know you guys are having fun, but I'm working and I have a late show coming up in 20 minutes. So I got to go, but love you and good night. And so I haven't been able to really instill whatever the work ethic that was instilled in me. It wasn't instilled in me, it was foisted upon me because I was desperate. But I do tell them constantly, it's about work, it's about focus, and it's about burning calories.
Gotcha. Okay. So they can connect the dots. The Paul Newman race cars aren't falling off a tree in your backyard, are they?
No,
Okay.
no, I think they're getting the picture,
Okay.
but who knows?
Okay. Post high school, you were a laborer on construction sites, right? And then you
Yes.
were a boxing instructor. Would you mind telling the story about how you met Jimmy Kimmel?
Okay, so I was a laborer. I walked on a construction site when I was 19, and I literally dug ditches. I mean, I think people use it as kind of a metaphor for, well, I was a ditch digger,
Yeah.
you'll be a ditch digger if you don't do your homework. But I dug ditches. It was a house in Silver Lake. We were digging footings, and we were digging footings, by hand, and that's what I did, for 9 or 10 hours a day. And then I kind of understood I didn't want to dig ditches for a living. It's if you dig ditches, like if you plant like a dwarf avocado tree in your backyard and you dig for 1 hour, it sucks. But have you ever dug for 10 hours? It's brutal.
Yeah.
Digging for an entire, digging from 7 a.m. to 5 in the evening, just literally digging. That was my job. There's no tools.
Yeah.
I didn't have any training. I quickly kind of figured out I needed a job. I had to keep it. I worked my way into like an apprentice and, into wearing tool bags and learning about carpentry and stuff like that. But the message that, how I met Jimmy, that you guys would probably get something out of, is after a number of years as working as a carpenter, I was doing carpentry by day, and I was trying to do comedy at night, but the comedy wasn't really happening, and I wasn't making any money, and didn't seem like it was happening. And so I was sort of like, at that point, comedy was a pipe dream. It was a real lofty goal, considering what I was doing for a living. And I thought, well, what are some other things you would like to do that don't involve being on a construction site, you know, dealing with stucco and illegal aliens and like sitting on a pile of drywall eating lunch,
There was some
you know?
earthquake remediation, crawling under houses.
Oh, yeah,
right?
doing earthquake rehab, like
Rehab.
crawling under buildings with dead cats and digging footings with a coffee can. Like I was like, what is something? And then I always boxed. I always liked boxing. I was good at it. I liked the subject of it. And I kind of thought, and there was all these boxing places, these sort of white collar boxing places that were opening up in Los Angeles, was kind of trendy. And I thought, well, I maybe go in there and like work as a boxing coach, and I could work with people and have conversations, and maybe there'd be some cute girls taking the classes and stuff, because there's no women on a construction site. It's the worst. And I thought, yeah, and I wouldn't get all covered with stucco dust and stuff, and I'd meet people that, you know, were interesting. So I went into a place called Bodies in Motion in on the West LA, across on Pico, across from Fox, basically in West LA. And I walked in, and the guy owned the place named Bruce Gordon. I knew a guy I went to college with him, and he kind of like recommended me. And so I walked in there, and I said, "Hey, I'm a boxing coach. You know, could you give me a job as a boxing coach?" And he just said no, because we hire ex-champs and people with names, you know, two-time Florida state champion or whatever. They got to be able to put something underneath your name.
Right.
You don't have any credentials, so just get lost. Like, it's like, we're not hiring you. We don't hire non-champions, you know. And so I was like,
Getting beaten up by Ray didn't count. As
getting beaten up by my
in the
friends
gym?
did not
No,
count.
okay.
But I was standing in the place, and I could see in the back, he had these speed bag stations that were on the floor. Like, you know, the big round thick pieces of, it's probably MDF or something, or MS. I'm trying to think of what it is. Anyway, I don't want to get, but they're like on the floor, and they're supposed to be hung up on the wall, right? And yeah, they're MDF, medium density fiberboard. It was like doubled up and right? And they're like on the floor. And so, like, I was looking at him, and he was telling me to beat it, you know, and I was looking at these heavy bags that were like laying on the floor, in the speed bags stations that were laying on the floor. And I said, "You need those hung?" And he was like, yeah. And I was like, "Well, you know, I'm a carpenter." He's like, "Oh." And he's like, you want to hang those heavy bags and hang those speed bag stations?" And I was like, "Well, if you let me teach boxing, I'll hang them for you." And he's like, oh, okay. All right. So I said to him, "I'll charge you $10 an hour, just flat, $10 an hour. I'll hang all these heavy bags and these speed bags and everything here, and you just give me a chance to teach boxing." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, fine." So I had something he needed at that point. He was telling me to get lost 10 minutes before that, but now once I had something he needed, and I hung everything, and he said he was at a gym in Pasadena. If I built out the gym in Pasadena, he would let me teach, you know, the morning classes or whatever, $20 a class, you know. But anyway, to me, it was like something other than construction. I would teach the boxing in the morning and do the construction in the afternoon, you know, and I did it. And I was driving my truck over the hill to deliver an entertainment unit, back when people had entertainment units with the big cutout for the TV set and the drawers with the VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And everything. I was built one of those custom for a customer on the West Side. And I was listening to the radio, and it was Kevin and Bean on K-Rock. And these two guys got into an argument on air, and it was Michael, the maintenance man, and Jimmy, the sports guy. And they got into a huge argument. And they said, we're going to have a boxing match and we're going to settle this in the ring. And we need coaches. We're going to need coaches or trainers. We're going to need equipment. We're going to need a venue. They're just putting it all out there. And I got to the customer's house because I didn't have a cell phone or anything. And I said, like, can I use your phone? And I was calling the station, leaving messages, blah, blah, blah. No one ever called me back. And they kept saying in the subsequent days, oh, we got a boxing match going on. We need trainers, you know. And I was like, I'm your trainer. I'm your trainer. But they never called me back. And I didn't know where they were. And finally I found out where the station was. And I went to the station. It was a commercial building. They're up on the 9th floor. I taught a 7 a.m. boxing class. I went there like 6:30 in the morning. Building was locked. Couldn't get into the building. Building hours were like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something. Went back, taught my class. The next day I had someone sub my class and I went back at 7 o'clock, got into the building and went up to the 9th floor where K-Rock was. And I got to the 9th floor and the K-Rock suite was locked. So the building was open, but K-Rock was closed 9 to 5, you know, where there are hours. And it was like 7 in the morning. Tried the doors, no receptionist, no nothing. I knew Kevin and Bean were doing their morning show in there somewhere, but I couldn't get to anywhere. I was just standing by the elevators and somebody got off on the 9th floor and they were walking around to the back of K-Rock. They had like a key card to get in like the back door. And I was walking with him and I was like, are you heading in to K-Rock? And they said, yeah. Like to this day, I don't know if he was filling the vending machine or like who that person was, but they're walking in. I said, boxing coach, I'm waiting by the elevator. I'll be here. Just send him out and I'll be here waiting. And the guy just kind of like waved his hand and just went in. I just stood by the elevators and then about a half hour. And at some point, some guy comes down the hall, kind of schlubby, young guy, comes down the hall. He goes, you the boxing coach? And I go, yeah. He goes, okay. I go, yeah. He goes, when do you want to start? I go, today. And he goes, okay. And that guy was Jimmy Kimmel. And we started that day, started training that day.
I think it worked out for you that you got Jimmy Kimmel because you went there intending you wanted to teach Michael, the maintenance guy, right? Does Jimmy give you crap about that to this day?
No,
Yeah.
Michael, the maintenance man, was black. And as the great Wesley Snipes says, always bet on black. He was also there, right? You know, it's a boxing match. You're going to pick the fat white guy. And then Michael, the maintenance man, was there for like 3 years. And Jimmy'd only been there for 3 months. And I was like, I bet this other guy knows the lay of the land better than Jimmy. So that was my impression. What I didn't know is Jimmy was more connected and more dialed in and writing more bits and doing more producing than Michael, the maintenance man, was, because I was just listening like a listener. So I didn't think they liked Jimmy. And Michael did win the fight. So, you know, in terms of training the guy who would win the fight, yeah, Michael would have been the guy.
Okay. Show of hands, does everyone know the story of Mr. Bertram? If not, I'll have him tell it, but who knows about Mr. Bertram? Okay, so not many.
3 guys.
You met Jimmy Kimmel. Eventually you went to radio. So how did that happen? You want to fill where there's a gap there, and I know the story, but you want to fill them in and
I was
how precipitous it was meeting Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, I was coming up on I'd always promised myself by my 30th birthday, like I would be doing something somehow in something other than construction, you know, something creative. Then didn't have any illusions about show business per se, but I was like, I'd like to be doing something other than construction. I would like it to be creative, comedy, creative, but not you know, not in front of the camera. I didn't have thoughts about, you know, being a celebrity of any kind. And I was turning 30. I was right on the cusp of turning 30, and I met Jimmy right before I turned 30, and trained him. I had about 2 or 3 weeks to train him for the fight, and then he lost the fight. But in the interim, when I was training him, I kind of convinced him that I was funny. He thought I was funny, but he didn't really have a lot of juice at the radio station. He wasn't high up. He was getting, I don't know, 46 grand a year working, doing sports, and he was kind of a day trader, a lower level guy on the morning show. But I got to him. Like he thought I was good. And when the boxing match ended on a Friday, I kind of said to him, well, is this it? Like, how do we go forward from here? So I'm out now, the fight's over, I'm the boxing trainer. And he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I think what I do is I hang out, I crack wise, and I roll, and I make everyone better. And he said, well, we don't need that. He said, what do you mean? He said, Kevin and Bean already do that. What do we need you? What do we need you for? And I was like, well, that's kind of what I do. And he said, well, if you want to get on the air, you got to do a character. And I said, well, I don't really do characters. And he said, well, you better figure it out, because that's the way you're going to get on the air. And I was like, oh, okay. So I don't really do characters, but he said, I'll give you the number. You can call in Monday morning. I'm not going to tell them who you are. I'm not going to tell them you're the boxing coach. If I tell them you're the boxing coach, they'll be like, well, this guy wants to get into comedy, whatever. I'll just tell them you're going to call. Someone's calling in, go with it. And so then I had the weekend to kind of figure out who this character was, but I don't do characters. So I kept sort of going through all these, he's the gay movie reviewer or something like that. And I couldn't really get my mind around anything. And then I kind of thought of a character, which was every shop teacher I ever had in junior high. And I thought, oh, these guys are mean and they're surly and they know shop. And I know the subject of woodworking. And so I played Pop Warner football for the East Valley Trojans. No, the Sun Valley Falcons I was on with a kid named Eric Burcham. And I always liked that kid's name, Burcham. And then I thought, birch is a kind of wood. And if I was a shop teacher at Louis Pasteur Middle School in Monrovia teaching remedial wood, I would be Mr. Burcham. And so I created this entire character named Mr. Burcham, which, by the way, the first time I wrote it, I wrote B-U-R-C-H, and Jimmy's like, B-I-R, douche. And I was like, okay. Jimmy told me how to spell my character's name, because birch, the wood, which he figured out, and I couldn't even spell because I was illiterate. But I worked out this character named Mr. Burcham, the woodshop teacher, and it just became a phenomenon, immediately a phenomenon. And I got, all of a sudden, I went from, teaching boxing and swinging a hammer to this guy that was being signed by William Morris agency. And it was just this crazy whirlwind of success based on this character that everyone somehow loved, that I just kind of crapped out on the weekend.
Great, thank you. I think we all know what the couple lessons from that story are. How fortunate that Jimmy appreciated your sense of humor, unlike the 5 mics on your construction site that thought you were funny but couldn't believe you were paying for the improv classes, right?
Yeah, construction was not a good. My comedic seed could find no purchase on the construction site. Construction sites are in LA. We say it's like 15 Mexicans and one dude named Mike, who's a racist, but he likes these Mexicans. It's just a bunch of Mexicans and a doofus dudes named Mike. Yeah. Who there were so many guys named Mike, you had to give them their trade behind it. Like, where's Mike? Mike the tin knocker or Mike the sheetrocker? No, the HVAC mic. Oh, HVAC mic's not like everyone was
Yeah.
Mike or Steve, and every white dude was named Mike or Steve, and then there was all the Hispanics and like I had dreams of comedy, but they didn't know anything about it. And I tried to explain to them about the groundlings or improv or and they were like they weren't having any of it. So and neither were my friends. There was anybody from where I grew up. So I was just kind of this will be my secret dream, like being gay in the 50s,
Secret dream. All right. I titled that last section, Chasing One's Dreams. These are my notes, grit and determination. My next section is Not Chasing a Dream, a Cautionary Tale. In this book, in 50 Years We'll All Be Chicks, page 201, if any of you want to buy
201.
Do you have these, Mike? This was written in 2010. You talk about a seat gutter system. In 2013, on Shark Tank season 4, the guys invented the drop stop.
Oh,
It's the #1 car accessory on Amazon. They're raking in $5 million a year in sales. They claim they had this idea driving, but I think they were Adam Carolla fans because you talked about this in your book in 2010. So that little gutter that goes, so when you drop your cell phone.
Yeah, I got tired of change or keys or lighters or sunglasses or whatever sort of falling in between the seats, but I didn't have the drop stop foam pad idea. I had the car gutter system where everything that fell out just ended up in a hopper in the trunk. It was just all rolled down. You'd probably be surprised. Like you'd be like, oh, there's a couple of silver dollars in here.
Yeah.
And a scrunchie from a prostitute I picked up. I don't even remember.
Good times. Fast forward, talk about K-Rock canceled the radio show. They changed formats, right? In 2009, this was
KLS X.
Or KLS, sorry, not K-Rock, KLS X. They changed formats. They went country or something on you. So the radio show was canceled in 2009, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We were all, that was during the middle of the great financial crisis. Demographic here, excuse all the me, like me. So we're all involved in the financial markets. Remember that time well. The podcast started in that time frame, right? So let's talk about how you turned that pretty sad, or could have been a really trying time. You got laid off. You were doing comedy on the radio show in the morning. I don't think you were one of the first podcasters. Where did you get that idea? And I assume you got your contract was canceled. You probably had severance. You didn't go to Vegas and blew it. You used that opportunity to start the podcast, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when I was doing terrestrial radio for a while, maybe the last 6 months or a year when I was doing terrestrial radio, they would come in with these reports where they'd go like, oh, you're #1 in Vegas, you're #1 in Seattle, you're #5 in LA. We got to get the ratings up in LA, and your number whatever in San Francisco, whatever it was. And then they would go, and you had 19 million minutes of streaming. And second only to the Fan in New York, who does, I don't know, the Yankees and the Mets games or something. And I would go, what do you mean 19 million minutes of streaming? And they'd go, well, people just listening on their computer. And I'd go, oh, well, that seems promising, right? That's something. And they go, no, it's nothing. We don't care about it. And I'd go, but there we got 19 million minutes of streaming, the second most amount streamed in America. And the guy go, yeah, you're #6 in LA. So get it together. And I go, yeah, but the streaming's got to be good, right? There are people all over the country that live and listen in Chicago. Yeah, you're not on in Chicago. They're just listening in Chicago. We can't sell ad sales in Chicago. So get your shit together in LA and stop worrying about streaming. And I'd go, okay. And then I would say to everyone, but that's pretty good, right? People listening in markets we're not in on their computer, and they never said anything about it. It was never, I never got a nickel for it or anything. But when they were pulling the plug on my show, I was like, well, there's all these minutes of streaming. Seems like I should go onto the internet and do the show on the internet where people are streaming. So I had, I think about 9 months left on my contract, which meant I got paid for the, it was, end of February or something. I got paid to the end of the year. I had 2 young twins, and I was like, all right, well, I'll just work for free, and I'm getting paid anyway, so I'll just work for free and see where this thing goes.
Gotcha. I remember that was on Stitcher. Wasn't that one of the first platforms? You remember that Stitcher
Probably.
radio?
Probably.
Kind of
didn't
wonky,
even,
didn't work
I didn't
very well.
even know anything
Yeah.
about it. I was just like, I'm going to broadcast every day
Yeah.
for an hour from my office.
So did you figure out how to monetize it, or did you, what happened there? Because we all know podcasting now, but it was early on. I had some early sponsors like Man Great, but there was no ads on the streaming early on, right? Or
No, there were no ads, and there wasn't a way to monetize it early on. I always had this sort of, vision that, well, if you have an audience, that you'll get paid for your audience at some point, whatever the medium is. It could be outdoor advertising, it could be terrestrial radio, it could be television. It sort of was like, well, look, if you can have X amount of people listening or viewing, then at some point someone's going to come up to you with a product and pay you some money to talk about it. I had that because that's the way it is. I mean, you go to the beach. I'm in Malibu half the time, and you look out the window and you see the plane pulling a banner that says Tecate beer on it. That's like, it's a Tecate beer, like, because there's X amount of people on the beach, and they can look up and be reminded to have a Tecate beer. And somebody paid that guy to fly that airplane. And I kind of understood it at that level. So I was like, I'm just going to talk and we'll kind of let the environment catch up, is kind of how I thought of it.
did you see the value of using that to build your brand awareness so that for comedy gigs? It's, I think, similar with the music industry where DVD sales went away and streaming, but then it leads to live shows and gigs.
No,
So
I thought, well, you could sell T-shirts and coffee mugs and tickets to live shows, and you could use it for something other than getting paid directly from sponsors. If that doesn't exist, then use it to sell tickets to a comedy show and get paid sort of indirectly.
Great. Eventually some finance nerds are going to invite you to come to Colorado. So
yeah, and also
only 13 years ago.
I mean, there's Amazon affiliates fairly early on, which is if people would sign up and go through your link on Amazon or something, you could get 1% on whatever purchase they made or whatever. But it added up, like it was several $1,000s a month just on Amazon affiliate stuff. So it basically, like, it was like there was no direct route to get paid to do podcasting with. There was like 4 or 5 ancillary routes to get paid that kind of added up to enough to make it into a business.
Okay. It's a good segue we'll talk about being in control of your own destiny. On the pod, you talk about building your own pirate ship. How important has that been to you? Podcast One is your distributor, correct? Have you lost any sponsors, or what's the value to you of owning your pirate ship versus having Jack Silver as a program director, being on terrestrial radio, or being tied to a studio with a TV show or something?
Well, I think as a creative, and especially as a comedian, you should long for autonomy. Autonomy is nice. Autonomy is nice if you work in in the roofing supply business. It's still nice, but creatively it's much nicer. You know, it's really kind of a death knell having unfunny people tell you what to say and what not to say. You know, again, like if you do aluminum siding, it still kind of sucks to have some douche boss who's telling you, you know, what to do. But comedically, it's kind of the opposite of creativity, you know. And if you just broke it down to sort of base elements, if there was someone standing next to Picasso or Mozart or Beethoven kind of going, you know, ran up the flagpole at corporate, here's the way we're going to do this. It's the death of art, you know, and it's kind of, and so people say, well, I want to be artistic and I want autonomy and I want to be left alone, but then they work for Viacom or they work for Disney. And now what? You know, and so then you go, well, I want total autonomy. Well, good, but you can do that and not get paid. You know, yeah. There's a reason people want to work for Disney. They get paid to work for Disney. So if you're just going to go hang your own shingle out, you'll have autonomy, but you may not get paid. So for me, I was always like, I kind of knew what it's like not to get paid. I you know, I worked construction. I didn't get paid barely anything. And so I was like, I got into comedy to say what I want to say. And, you know, especially something like podcasting or stand-up or something like that, you know, why do it if you can't say what you want to say? So I've always had that mindset. I've never looked at it as a choice between saying what you want to say and getting paid. I've always just thought I just have to say what I want to say. It does get in the way of getting paid on occasion. I was at the Hollywood Improv on Tuesday night, and I was with Craig Robinson, who's the big black Pizza Hut guy. He's a real nice guy. And we're sitting in the green room. He was eating hot wings. I thought it's weird when fat guys eat in front of you, you know, like I thought you try to tamp it down. He was like, he had a whole order of hot wings. And he was just like sitting there eating hot wings. I was just sitting on the sofa. I was going to go up in minutes, do 15 minutes, and he was going to come up after me. And he's just eating these wings, yeah. And like at some point he stopped and he went like, must have been nice being able to say what you want about COVID. And I said, yeah, I said what I wanted about COVID. And he's like, yeah, must have been nice because he works for Pizza Hut. He can't say shit about COVID. He's going to get his fucking black ass canned from Pizza Hut. So he may not think the vaccine's a good idea and he may not think the masks are effective, but he's got to shut up because he will be shit canned from his job for Pizza Hut and whatever else he's got going. If he said one word about the vaccines or about masks or about COVID or about Fauci, he would be gone. And he understands that. Yeah. And I understand that. And that's why he stopped eating wings for 3 seconds and said, must be nice. Now, I could say to him, must be nice to shut the fuck up and get that Pizza Hut money. Because I don't get Pizza Hut money. I don't get any money from that because I say what I want. But ultimately, and as I would say to people all the time, I'll go back to being a carpenter if I stop saying what I think. I got into comedy to say what I want. I have a trade. I would be taking a significant pay cut, but I could always go back and put the bags back on.
Nationwide shortage of laborers in comedy.
Oh, nationwide.
You're good. So.
Oh.
So I assume your sponsors, your advertisers, they understand you, they know you, they know what they're getting into. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing you probably haven't lost any over the years, but they wouldn't have approached you in the first place.
Advertisers come and go.
Okay.
I don't know the reasons they come and go. Some stay longer than others, but it's hard to evaluate like who left for what reason.
Gotcha. All right, moving on. So for those, this is news here. He's heading to Las Vegas probably in the next year or so. The twins are seniors in high school, so you can finally get out of California. We're all in the finance world. Yeah, high taxes, regulation. If we have time, we'll talk about your interview with Gavin Newsom on the pod a few years ago. And
Oh, I hope we have time for that.
yeah, I know. The school to prison pipeline. There's been this is really relevant to our business in the investment management space. There's been a large out-migration from California. They're driving out their high net worth individuals. I think you're following Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark, right? Vegas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm following.
Yeah,
Wahlberg.
because they're going to hang out in the same neighborhood, right? Just tell some stories about trying to put a pool in, and what's it like living in California with the regulation, the taxes? We read about it, but trying to deal with the building department in Los Angeles.
Well, I kind of think of it this way, and I'll see if I can paint a metaphor, an example here. So there's a street that goes past Forest Lawn Mortuary Cemetery. It's just called Forest Lawn Drive. It's a very long street. There's no signals. It's just kind of a long, straight highway. Runs by CBS or Paramount or whatever. Warner Brothers, I think it is. And it's a long street, and it's right in the middle, kind of Toluca Lake, Studio City area. And my observation was several years ago. So I used to live up in the hills of Hollywood, and I'd come down Barham, and I'd go down Forest Lawn Drive to get to the shop in Glendale where I do the podcast. And one day I was heading down, and I noticed on one side of the street were a whole bunch of illegals selling flowers. So they're kind of street urchin types selling flowers to the people that were going up to see, Nana's tombstone. But I noticed on the other side of the street, there was a motorcycle cop that had backed his motorcycle up the Jewish cemetery driveway, and he was sitting there with a radar gun. And I had seen people pulled over along Forest Lawn Drive. So I thought, on one side of the street, there's illegal activity going on. There's people selling flowers, undercutting the local store that has to pay the taxes and the workman's comp and everything else. And on the other side of the street, there's the LAPD handing out tickets to citizens who pay taxes for going 12 miles an hour faster than the posted speed limit. So I was like, that's a weird way to run a city. And now Forest Lawn Drive has all the illegals selling flowers on one end of it, and the other end is just filled with Winnebagos, filled with camper trailers, like literally 70 of them, just all along some of the most expensive real estate in Southern California, just living free and dealing fentanyl in their Winnebagos. And so what I sort of thought about was this. Every city has a kind of a chasm between the empty bags, the homeless, the people that take, the people who don't, what side of the ledger are you on? You paying taxes or you using services, And every city sort of has a chasm of sort of like, well, this guy's homeless, he doesn't pay taxes, we need to spend money and put money into the shelter or get him help or whatever. And then there's the people keeping the lights on, paying the taxes. And there's always going to be that chasm there. But in LA, it's a huge chasm. It is a total blind eye to all almost all criminal behavior, and then a complete stomping down on any taxpayer. Like, you want to pull a permit and put a deck on your backyard, good goddamn luck. Like, if you want to park a Winnebago in Venice Beach, California, and deal fentanyl out of it, no problemo. If you want to put a gazebo in your backyard, that's going to be 4 years. And so you have to either have, it's either got to be, look, we're not enforcing laws. Like, if you want to deal meth out of your Winnebago on Forest Lawn Drive, go, so be it. If you want to put a second story in your house, like, knock yourself out. But it can't be wildly overly regulated, burdensome taxes on one group. I mean, the group that's essentially playing by the rules. So the people in LA are sort of like, look, we're playing by the rules. We're doing everything you're asking us to do, and you're kicking the shit out of us. Meanwhile, there's criminals running wild, and you're not doing anything about them. So of course, the people that are paying all the taxes, playing by the rules and doing everything right, who are being villainized, well, of course they're going to move at a certain point. Like, I will tell you a story that I really think is horrifying. I was on a boat to Catalina a couple of years ago, but only like 4 years ago. And one of the guys on the boat was the guy who runs the Staples Center, which is now the crypto center or whatever it is, but ran the Staples Center, right, in Los Angeles. And he said, oh yeah, I run the whole thing. The concerts, the Lakers, the Clippers, everything. I do everything. I said, you know, I went to a Lakers game with my son last year, and when we walked out, I almost tripped over a guy selling the ghetto dogs on the cart, you know, with the propane tank. Right on the door, just tons of illegal aliens just selling street food. I said, they weren't on the street. They were on the Staples Center property. They were right up against the door, this expanse, the sidewalk. And he's like, yeah, man, we hate it. And then he pulled out his phone and he goes, oh man, you're not gonna believe this. Show me a picture of one of those food carts with the propane tanks cooking the ghetto dogs, giant cockroach on the grill next to the hot dog, right? So I said, oh, well, this is insane. I mean, it's on your property. You own the whole property. They're not on the street. They're right in front of the exits. He goes, I know, we hate it. See, you hate it. Oh, go talk to the city council and get these guys kicked off of this thing. You guys have completely, you know, the Staples Center basically spearheaded the rejuvenation of downtown LA. Downtown LA was dark and dicey and crappy. Staples came in. I don't know what they're paying in taxes or what they're putting into the community, but it's millions and millions of dollars in revenue that they're putting in between all the concerts and all the events and all the professional games and everything. And I go, go to the city council, tell them to get these guys off your lawn. This is insane. He goes, I don't want to get into trouble. I said, you don't want to get into trouble? I said, oh yeah, if I go to them with that, they'll fuck me up. I can't tell them that. I was like, you're getting into trouble? You run the Staples Center. These guys are all over your property selling food illegally without a license. He's like, yeah, I don't even tell anyone we were talking about this. I don't want to get into trouble. That's what LA is. Staples Center doesn't want to get into trouble for telling illegals to not sell their food. By the way, you open a restaurant, it's going to take 35 permits for you to open a restaurant. But if you just want to sell food on the Staples Center property and you're illegal, you're fine. You go to Rams game at SoFi, they're selling food. They're selling tequila shots. They're selling Coronas in the parking lot next to cops. I'm seeing LAPD standing there, like kind of doing crowd control while people are selling by. Well, these guys are selling beer out of a cooler 3 feet away from the cop. They don't do anything. That's what happened to LA. It's probably what's happening to Denver, I would imagine. So You can have a small chasm between illegal behavior and how you treat the taxpayers, but you cannot have the Grand Canyon, which is complete blind eye to illegals and beat the shit out of taxpayers. You can't have that. If LA was like, yeah, well, we don't have a state tax and we're not over litigious and we're not overly regulated and the permits are easy, I'd be like, all right, just live and let live. It is not that.
Isn't that wild? Because when you were in high school, weren't you petrified of walking down the street with an open container or beer underage? What if a cop saw you back then versus now?
Oh, all the stuff people you tune in, watch the news, they're in New York, they're on the hood of the cop car jumping up and down. I mean, could you imagine when you're in high school? I'm gonna go get on that cop car's hood and jump up and down.
All right, we're running out of time. I want to do a rapid fire here. Just a couple thoughts on, well, let's talk about your crystal brain real quickly. In one of your books, you wrote about Donald Trump becoming president, and then in Emotional Support Animal, you actually talked about it in your radio show in 2008, and you have it on audio recording, right, Mike? You predicted Donald Trump would be president in 8 years. That's
well,
wild.
I said in 2008 he's going to be president.
Sorry,
16.
16. I'm sorry. Yeah, in 08 you said he'd be president in 16.
I also said Bruce Jenner was turning into a chick in 1996. So way ahead of the curve.
And I think you were also ahead of the curve. How many dogs were on that JSX plane? I was waiting for you at the airport. I saw at least 4 dogs. Come on.
Yeah,
only two.
There was a medium-sized dog and a smaller dog, and on the JSX flight out here. And first off, I don't know what the rules are with traveling with dogs, but we need more of them. But this dog was sitting up on the JSX, has this weird sort of credenza thing to the right and left of the seat, and the dog was just like sitting up there, and the stewardess dude came by and he said, you got to put the dog down on the floor. And the nutty broad who brought the dog was like, he's a nervous flyer, and the guy's like, well, he needs to go on the floor. And he's like, he's pretty nervous, and the guy's like, all right, nut job. And the dog just sat there. But I thought it was an emotional support dog. So if the dog's a nervous flyer and you're a nervous flyer, then who's a stable person in this relationship? Like, who's keeping it real here? The dog's nervous and you're yes, there's a dog. There's 2 dogs, medium size. But understand, the flight only had 19 people on it. 2 dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are math whizzes, do that.
I think you had predicted that years ago. How that was before the peacock on the plane, how out of control.
Yeah.
Speaking of planes, people back in the day used to get dressed up, fly in suits. Now they're in sweats, and in the Senate, let's talk about John Fetterman's dress code. Because where have we gone?
Well, hell in a basket. I mean, for sure. So there's this weird game that everyone plays, which is if you're against any of this stuff, then you're old and you're stuck in your ways and you're like semi-racist and you're whatever else. And the reality is, whether it's tearing down a statue or Fetterman, wearing gym shorts in the House, first off, can we at least admit that there were some who came before us who had some goddamn wisdom? Like, they weren't all slave-owning idiots, right? Somebody knew something. They built things, they created things, they made constitutions. They were not a bunch of just racist white guys. Like, some of them had a couple of brain cells to rub together, and they had some thoughts. So instead of just sort of throwing them out with the bathwater, like, could we go, okay, maybe Ben Franklin or whoever statue we're taking down this weekend, could we at least go, there was a time that was current time, but it was like 1726, and that guy was known as a smart guy, and he had ideas, and they endured. And we shouldn't be treating them all like our crazy old racist grandfather. Like, oh, what do they know? Ah, come on. That was 10 minutes ago. So there are things that are in place, and there's procedures, and there's decorum, and there's sort of reasons for it. And I don't think things live on an island. I don't think it's like, well, take down all the statues and rename all the schools, and Fetterman can wear gym shorts into Congress. Like, it's a general basic decline of society is the way I look at it.
There's decorum. It's why my friend Ryan is not wearing Crocs here tonight.
That's right.
Right,
Thank
Ryan?
you. Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, you guys had time to check in. Did you check the coffee ratio, decaf versus caffeinated coffee pods in your room here at the Grand Hyatt?
Not yet,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I will be apoplectic if it's
50-50?
Well, first, it shouldn't even be a ratio. There should be no decaf coffee. If you like decaf coffee, you don't like coffee. It shouldn't exist. Who made this thing? You know what I mean? It's like saying, well, yeah, you like doing cocaine? Well, here's some talcum powder. No. Well, why? You like snorting white stuff? Yes, I do, but not talcum powder. All right, let me get you some baking soda. No, it's like it shouldn't exist. But listen, neither should non-alcoholic beer, or it's just there are many things like passion fruit iced tea shouldn't exist. But I don't know, you guys, those who are staying in rooms, check it tonight. But it doesn't need to be 50-50 any more than when you throw a Super Bowl party and you have 25 people over the house and you go, all right, we're gonna get 5 meat lovers pizzas and 5 veggie lovers. No. That's not 50-50. 1 veggie lovers pizza for your 3 asshole friends, and the rest will be meat lovers. Do not do the 50-50.
Thank you. That was actually my next question, whether you, in your office, you allow a 50-50 ratio when there's a catering, so with veggie. Purell, let's riff on that. We got a few minutes left. I think you were on the anti-Purell train years ago.
Way before everyone.
Right?
Yes.
And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
We're still in the Purell.
Anti-Purell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have any other thoughts on that? Have we bounced back though? People realize we shouldn't be I mean, you ate a nut off the tarmac at Burbank a few years ago, didn't you?
That a cashew that a pigeon picked up and spat out. The pigeon, a nut. I threw a cashew to a pigeon on the tarmac at Burbank, and the pigeon like went up to it and it picked it up in its beak and it went, not for me. And it dropped it back down. And I walked over to the cashew and I picked it up and I ate it. Yeah. So Mother Nature knows what it's doing. We're not meant to rub and scrub and exfoliate and do all the shampooing, and it's not natural. We don't need it. All the studies say it. I've always known it. Amish kids don't have allergies. They don't. They roll in the dirt. They play outside. They just don't. Amish kids don't have, every one of these rich white kids is allergic to 15 things, Like, I mean, look, all the knowledge you need is right in front of your faces. It's right in front of you. You don't need to read studies. Like, everyone growing up, did you know anyone who had a peanut allergy? Peanut allergies didn't exist when I was a kid. There's no zone for eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like a special bench for kids to eat at school. It didn't exist when we were kids. It exists now big time. So what is it? The molecules have changed in humanity over the last 41 years. Like what is happening? Nothing. It's Purell and it's a bunch of crazed moms, and it's in everyone's head. And it's also mixed with not being exposed to things. There's simple studies, like people who have indoor outdoor dogs, like kids who have indoor outdoor dogs that go out, roll around, and then come back in at night and like sleep on the kid's bed. These kids have much less allergies than the kids who just have indoor dogs because they get exposed to stuff, because your body and your immune system needs a workout. It needs to be exposed to things. It's not any different than your quads. It's like, what do your quads need? They need resistance. You go to outer space, there's a big problem. When they put people up in the space station for 6 months, they lose bone density and they lose muscle mass. Why? Because they're floating. There's nothing pushing against them. There's no resistance. They're floating. And when you start floating, you atrophy immediately. And your whole body's that way. Your brain's that way, your quads are that way, and your immune system's that way. Don't expose your immune system to anything. It will get weakened immediately. It needs to work out. It needs to push back against things. You cannot protect your kids from everything. You're weakening their system. So F Purell, all the antibacterial, everything, soap and all the veggie wash and all this. It's all Procter and Gamble and Big Pharma and Madison Avenue just selling dumb women junk that they don't need on behalf, under the guise of loving. Oh, I love my kid, so I'm going to slather him in shit that's going to be bad for him. Just wake up, women. It's women. Men don't care about this, but the women take it home and my wife had a thing of veggie wash. It was a bottle that had pictures of happy vegetables on it. And you would spray the veggies with it. And I'd go, just wash it under the goddamn sink. You know, you got to use the veggie wash. That veggie wash thing, we had that one bottle for like 9 years. Because every month and a half, I would unscrew it and top it off with tap water and put it right back on and set it there. Like, so you had to think, I've never run out of veggie wash in 13 years. Like, every 4 weeks, it was like, all right, top it off, right back on again. Pow.
They're still alive, right? They're 18 now, right? So
The
I
kids
think
are
they
still
survived.
alive. They're still alive. Yeah,
Right,
they made it.
3 more questions, or it could be quick. In one of the books, you have a section called "Do Yourself a Favor," buy multiples. I read this years ago, and I now have a nail clipper in my office drawer, my home, all over the house, multiple pairs of sunglasses. What else are we forgetting from that? Or what did I forget to add to that list? Buy yourself multiples so you're not running around the house looking for a 99-cent item. Did I forget anything?
Well, let's see if I can add to that tally. But the basic premise is, don't buy, don't buy 3 cars in case you lose one. But for the junk that's cheap, that you use and that you need, like, how many times have you just been looking for fingernail clippers at your house? It's always a big argument with the spouse. You know what I mean? Like, where are they're in they should be in your medicine guide. They're not in the counter. That's where I put them. They're not there. I don't know. Maybe the maid put them. It's like, just for the nothing junk, like clippers. Just go buy 5 of them and put one in your car.
Scissors.
Put one in the medicine. Scissors. Like, for the cheap junk, just get a bunch of it and spread it around so you're not wandering around looking for nothing. So definitely multiples of cheap, anything under $5, get 5 of them and put one everywhere in your house.
Okay, great advice. All right, we can stop the recording if you want.